Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial organizer, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And you know, Roberta, a lot of our focus on these programs has been financial literacy, which is obviously very important. But you know, the law, Your Money and You, we have to emphasize legal literacy too, because people can get themselves into jams. And we want to make sure people understand their obligations and their rights.
Because it costs them money one way or the other,
Either
too.
way,
So
sure.
it's intertwined. But today we have a special guest, and we're focusing on our Credit for Life fair, where part of it is they have to either share a room or have their own apartment, and even when they go off to college, or even when not at college, people have landlords, landlord and tenants. And if there's anybody who's an expert on that, it's Jerry Saphire, who's been at it for so many years. And he, of course, is my husband. Sometimes people think he's my father. but they're
I
just
hear that so
kidding.
many times.
Welcome here.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for that wonderful welcome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, as a beautiful wife said, I have been around at the law for a number of years, along with a few other things too. But I've been an attorney for, I don't know, a little under 50 years, 45, 48 years, something in that vicinity. And
But tell them the property, the first, you first became a landlord.
Yeah, as soon as we graduated, I got out of law school, passed the bar, and started to practice law. I didn't make too much money in those days practicing law right off the bat. So I figured, gee, why don't I try to get something that maybe might provide some continuous income stream on the side at least. So I managed to scrape a few bucks together and wheel and deal a little bit. Now, anyways, I ended up buying a two-family house, I remember, in Braintree. Remember that house in Braintree? And it took a little bit of work. I got that fixed up, got it rented. And that was kind of like the start of what turned out to be a string of houses. By the time we ended up in Westwood, I don't know, about 7, 8 years later, we went from Holbrook, Randolph, Westwood. I probably had about 8 or 10 houses with tenants in there, who a lot of them I eventually ended up as buyers.
Oh.
You don't have to make all the money for yourself. Leave a little bit for other people. Provide an incentive. And I did, and it worked out pretty well. I made a little bit of cash flow, along the way from each and every one. But if you sit with property for a while, long enough, you start to get what's called equity buildup, along with other advantages like tax advantages where you can take depreciation, things like a lot of advantages with real estate. And so after a while, it turned out that I owned a bunch of houses and was able to ultimately, to use it for other purposes when I liquidated them one by one. I had built-in buyers, so it worked out pretty well. And that's kind of like how we started in the real estate business.
And we've also been on both ends. It's landlord problems and tenants problems. But basically our focus today is on our college students, soon-to-be college students, and there'll be leftover advantages and information for average Joe. But what should these college students, probably all are going to have landlords and security deposits.
The chances are that's exactly right. It turns out that one of the properties that we have is in Bridgewater, right next to Bridgewater State College, which I believe now they call, is it now a university? Yeah. So we have had some experience with college students actually renting to them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, for some years, we were not doing anything with college students, thinking, well, we don't want to get involved with partying and this and that, and, but after a while, we started to think, when vacancy opportunities came up, something, there were an awful lot of kids out there. They're great kids. But why not put yourself together with some great kids, which can provide an income stream too, and be good for them too. They're right next to the college. And so we've had a lot of experience with leases and putting leases together. And there are a few things that I think are worthwhile to pass along to college students to think about to begin with. everybody is going to, we don't know whether they don't know whether they'll end up in the dorm, or a lot of times the dorms are full. They have to get a place by the dorm someplace, so they end up, which we called off campus, someplace that can get there in a reasonable period of time. And they're going to have to eventually end up with what they call a lease in all probability.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be for at least a year. I would suggest that if, maybe to save them some money, they're going to be in that college environment for 3 or 4 years. Sometimes you can get what we like to do, and if college students can get what they call a self-extended lease, that extends itself instead of having to renew and renegotiate the terms each year. Sometimes Roberta and I have never really done this. Once we put somebody in, if we're happy with them as a tenant, if they're good, we generally let them ride along. Maybe it's not good business, I don't know, but we're happy enough with that if they prove themselves good. Well, if you get a self-extended lease and you're a pretty good tenant, there's I think, maybe a better chance of keeping the rent the same without being jacked up each year, which a lot of landlords have a tendency to do.
Sure.
So I think that's something that a student should think about. The best time to negotiate your best deal up front with the rent is in the beginning, when the landlord's tongue is hanging out looking to replace that vacancy. More apt to wheel and deal with you.
Sure.
You know, at least maybe keep it the same. You know? So that's one thing that I'm thinking of. There's a good thing for them to have in mind earlier. And the other thing is that, and if there's any one point to walk away from this little discussion about leases, it's they want to make sure if they put up a security deposit that they get it back. A lot of times landlords use different reasons to try to grab off somebody's security deposit when it wasn't the fault of the student at all.
Oh, really?
Not at all. But it's not it's kind of customary to get a first month, a last month,
Right.
and a security deposit. Sometimes you can wheel and deal a little bit. If you run into a situation where you really like the apartment and the landlord, you think he's willing to deal with you a little bit, you can try to get them to give you a little time. If you're under the gun, you don't have all the money, your folks don't have the money to just come up with, because chances are you're being subsidized while this has happened by your parents.
Oh, yeah.
You mean
But-
paying the security deposit out, so that you
Paying
don't
it
have to
out.
come up with all the money
If-
at once?
yeah.
It makes it easier for them.
Sometimes that
And
might
some
be able to
landlords
help
will
you.
do that.
A little bit. If they don't broach the possibility as a landlord trying to cultivate every possibility to put a good person, after a while you get an instinct of who's might be good that you'd really like to get in as a student. Seems like a really nice person and deserving to get in. You work with them. So don't be, I'm talking as if the students right here, you know. Don't be afraid to suggest to people some things that you think might be helpful to you if you need it and you don't have any other alternative.
Sure.
The other thing is, when it comes to the security deposit, Massachusetts has a state law with respect to security deposits. And they also have a law with respect to the condition of the apartment that you're renting. Why? Because it's so easy for a landlord owner to clip somebody's security deposit if you can't prove to them that that damage was there before you even occupied the apartment. So they're required to give you a form. And you don't take it haphazardly, like it's just a thing to fill out quickly, without really being descriptive enough.
It's called a statement of conditions, so our students should make sure
Sure.
that the landlord gives them that.
In fact, I had spoken with some landlords and attorneys for landlords over the years. And as you know, one of the things that we do as a side business is the property inventory. And the
right.
property inventory, one of the uses of it is exactly what you're saying, where you go in and not only fill out the statement of condition in writing, but you can take the photographs
Yeah.
and show that this dent on the wall was already there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, one of our interns, because when this comes up, we get calls, is like when the kids are coming out of college, and it might not just be in Massachusetts, they went to Illinois, they went to Washington, D.C., and the landlords kept their deposit, and, oh, well, you know, and they're writing it off. Well, don't write it off. Don't write it off, because with a letter written the right way, you'll get that money back. But they have, it's not only that the statement of condition, but one of our interns, Lauren, she took pictures. She was moving into an apartment. She took pictures and she wrote things out and she sent it to them. She had no trouble getting her security deposit back.
About security deposits, is it true that if somebody gives a security deposit at the beginning, that they're entitled to interest that earns in a bank account?
That is the law in Massachusetts. The way that it works is the owner of the apartment is required to post that security deposit in a separate, in an escrow account.
Uh-huh.
If they place it in an escrow account, usually a bank, and if they place it in the bank, then the interest that they're required to account for to the tenant, and it is on an annual basis. It should be paid each and every year.
Oh.
You do not wait
Oh.
until the end. The law actually prescribes that it's done on an annual basis.
Okay.
So if you provide that they get it back on an annual basis, if you fail to do that, of course you got a real serious problem there. And I'm thinking in terms of that security deposit now. I had a point that I was thinking of, but it just
That's
escaped
what
me.
happens to me.
at-
Well,
at
you
the-
have
at
to
the
you have to
moment.
put it the security deposit. You let them know. Now you might have 20 apartments, and I think the literal meaning of the law is each one needs a separate account, but they will
Yeah.
if you follow the spirit
Well, the
of the
thing is
law.
that, the thing
it's a
is, what I was
separate
going to say
escrow
is that
account.
if you have that account, the bank prescribes the interest, whatever it happens to be. But if absent having it in a separate account, if you fail to do that, you have to pay over 5% interest. That's according to the law. Mass General Laws, I happen to know because I read it the other day, Chapter 186, Section 15B. But what it does is it means that put it in an escrow account, make sure that it's there and separate, and if you don't, you're paying 5%.
Oh.
And it doesn't matter that the bank is only charging $1.
Yeah,
Is
they could be
giving you
charging
$1.
0.5%.
Yeah, if the half of 1%.
So
It
that
goes
means
to
if, let's say, someone is renting an apartment and it's going to be 1 month's rent plus a security deposit, which would be the
It's a
last
month-
month's
It
rent.
equals 1 month
No,
rent.
don't.
Yeah.
The security deposit is not the last month's rent.
It
They can't use
equals.
it as the last
It-
month?
No, the
They're not-
amount
they're not
of the
supposed
security
to.
deposit is equal to a last month's rent. It is not to
They
be
can't
confused.
use it as
Well,
the
it
last
doesn't
month's
have
No.
to be. They usually ask for 1 month's rent as a security deposit, but you could ask for, if the rent is $1,500, you could say, I want 5,000
Well,
security.
that's
The
true, but
security deposit is to be used if you leave without paying and you owe money, so the landlord can take the security, correct me
yeah,
if I'm
you
wrong,
can, no,
take
that's
the-
true. You
can
can
deduct
use
it from the
a security deposit towards rent that has not been
that's-
paid, that's due in
and,
arrears.
and any damage that's done. But you can't say, well, I'm a tenant. You can say, I'm using the security deposit as the last month's rent.
Okay.
No, you can't.
You can't, okay.
Because that's not, but majority of people do. So you've got to see what the law is and
Yeah,
the practical
yeah.
approach. But every now and then you get a wise guy, either a wise guy landlord or a wise guy tenant, who starts quoting you the law and they have no idea what the law is, I mean, you can, a million examples.
Right, no, it happens,
And,
it happens all the time.
yeah, how about the one who says, well, the law is this, I'm withholding, I'm going to stay here forever. We had this one. I'm staying here till it's resolved, and it may not be resolved for a year and a half, and then I'll pay you what I owe you. Meanwhile, the guy loses his job. He's not paying anything. He's going to stay there for nothing.
Yeah, right.
You got to get him out.
One thing I'd like to say, if there's a student looks like they're going to be going out of state, right? Out of state, I think it's particularly important to be very descriptive in that statement of condition and to at least take pictures
Yeah, the pictures are right.
of everything, because it seems that landlords from out of state are in a better position from just the standpoint that it's much more inconvenient for you to try to even be able to follow up with them.
Okay.
Roberta and I, this has nothing to do with just a tenancy, but just to talk about a security deposit. I mean, we're both attorneys, and when about 15, 16 years ago, before we bought our condo in Arizona, we rented a house, and the guy who owned it was trying to clip our security deposit
Uh-oh.
because he knew we were coming from Massachusetts. In the end, it didn't happen. We had to end up taking a video camera and
Oh, my daughter did.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
he wouldn't
take-
come and look at the property there. He waited till we going, and we said, well, where's the security? But, well, I have to go over everything. And it was
Right.
one of the first times I saw him go crazy. You will give us back that security deposit. I can guarantee you. You will give it back.
Well,
but the guy was probably used to people
Yeah, yeah.
coming, going
The-
home, and what are they going to come back?
Right.
to his,
Right, that's not
whatever
going to
it
happen. So the
was?
point that I'm making is
It
any
was like
student that's going
1,500
out
or
of state
something.
and
Yeah.
ends up off campus renting an apartment is particularly susceptible
to bad
to getting
landlords.
their security deposit clipped quicker than somebody that's at
Yeah.
Bridgewater
Around the
State.
corner, yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. What are some of the things that renters should be careful of that would, what are some of the things that can happen that can damage enough that they would not get their security deposit back?
Well, suppose, for example, there's a party and holes through the
Broken screen door.
wall or something. They get a little out of hand, right?
Yeah.
Suppose there's some chewing of the carpet by a dog.
Which wasn't
I
supposed
mean-
to be in there.
Some of these things are obvious where you're going to be, really in trouble. If you have doors that have been slammed on kitchen cabinets that are practically falling down and hanging, I mean, you have to be respectful.
That's why as a landlord,
Of-
you have to
of
be
property.
careful who you rent to.
Right.
But like Jerry says, there are a lot of good students out there, and you have to make sure. Well, say somebody's in their junior year and they work also. Well, the chances are they're going to do less damage and less be nicer to the apartment than somebody who's a freshman or sophomore and the parents are paying and they don't work and they're just
Exactly.
and then there are ways if you do have an apartment and you're the landlord there are ways to check. I mean, you can check. Well, first of all, I don't think that freshmen rent the apartments unless it's overdue. But unless there's
I think
t-
first
unless
year
the
they're required.
dorms,
I think
yeah,
most
to
cases
stay-
to
stay
they
in the
arrange
dorm.
for dorms
Yeah.
first year.
But you got the ones like the sophomores. They start in that. I mean, it depends. Well, what do they do? Are they into partying? A lot of times you see them smoking, or or they show up half dressed, things
One-
like that. You have to be careful. You also, as a landlord, you should get the parents to guarantee it.
One thing I would recommend is that when it comes to the security deposit, with respect to the descriptions of what the problem is, I would say the more specific the student is in terms of the damage, I think the more credibility he has that what he's saying is actually the way that it was when he occupied the apartment. So if you have a problem with carpet, I would recommend, instead of saying, for example, damaged carpet, let's say there were some burn situations. Well, it has damaged it. If there were 4 burns or 5 or 3 or 2, I would have the number in there, 3 burns, 3 burn hole marks on the carpet, frayed on the edges badly. In other words, it shows, what does it show? It's obvious what it shows. It shows that he was particular on noting each thing, trying to do a very competent, thorough job on the damage, and it adds to the credibility of him as a witness. So I would say don't take it lightly. Be serious about that. And one other thing I'd like to throw out, I think, with respect to the security deposits and your ability to get it back quicker than the landlord owner might like to give it back.
Yeah.
And that is, under Massachusetts law, I don't know what it is in other states, but under Massachusetts law, the Consumer Protection Act is applicable. So what that means is you can get deceptive acts and practices. Somebody is just trying to clip your security deposit. That's clearly a wrong and bad, and it's a terrible thing to do. The students, the chances are, they don't have any money. They're being subsidized for the most part by the parents. And the parents, a lot of times, they don't have any more knowledge about what's going on, about how to protect themselves from, you know, from people like that who are taking money that doesn't belong to them, basically. You know, so you can, if you send them certified letter, return receipt requested, you have to give like a with deceptive act and practice, you got to give them a notice. I believe it's a 30-day notice. They have 30 days to respond, and you got to send that out to them so they have an opportunity, the landlord, to respond and give you their side of things. So if they don't respond in the 30 days, then they're going to be defaulting. And if they do respond, but ultimately it's not legitimate, then you have a right, if the judge decides, even in small claims court, you don't have, this is the key, you don't have to hire an attorney. No attorney is going to take a case for $800 or something. It's beyond them. So in the end, you know, if you had no recourse to do it on your own, you'd forfeit it. But you can sue in small claims. You can sue for treble damages. Treble. You put up $1,000 rent. They fail to, as a security deposit, equal to a month's rent, and they fail to give it back to you.
It's $50
they can be
a
liable
year.
for $3,000 plus attorney's fees.
Really?
Oh, yeah, the attorney's fees.
Attorney's
they
fees
can
can
really-
amount to more than the $3,000. So what you're doing is you're putting that landlord who thinks you're a target, you're putting him in some great jeopardy. He better think about this thing twice. You know, if you got the particularity of the descriptions of everything, and it's pretty clear to an average person you should be getting your money back, I think it'd be well advised to do it.
The problem is a lot that you have good landlords and bad tenants who decide, well, we'll just throw rubbish out the window and call the Board of Health. And then we won't pay the rent. So, you know, you run into
that happened to her brother about 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
He was going to fix up the property, and people didn't
This
like
was
it.
a three-family in Dorchester at the
They
time.
threw
And
rubbish out.
he wanted to improve it, and they
want it
didn't like the
improved.
idea because he may have jacked up the rent possibly for putting in modern, but you know, before it was all over, they threw garbage
And we're
down.
not kidding, you know, you've got to be kidding. And the funny thing is, I remember it, I
This
chased
is
the
a true
guy all
story.
over for the rent. His legal aid would show up with this like that, and then it would be continued, and then the guy said, well, oh no, we're not representing him anymore. He skipped on us too. So,
Gotta be
you know,
kidding.
yeah, kidding. How about you got to be kidding? That was funny. We really got to be kidding. That was excellent. I mean, we could go on and on, but the kids, don't rush in. That's the advice on this. Just don't rush in because you're so happy somebody will rent to you. Make sure that you take those pictures. That's it, but in a nice way. We always tell people, do things in a nice way. You know, and don't try to get the last penny out of it. You know, just be reasonable. But anyway, he
There-
reminded me.
Is there anything that's happened over the years, because you've been doing this for so long?
Yeah,
Any
that's funny.
situation that you've run into that is really kind of unusual with landlord-tenant?
Funny
Yeah,
you should
me too.
ask me that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, I told you, we've been at it a long time. And one of the properties I had many years ago was a 5-unit in Abington. It was kind of on an expansive lot of
Beautiful.
land, yeah. And it was at least like about an acre there. And there was a tenant that had been giving me some trouble, and I'd reached a point where I have finally concluded, this guy has to go. I'm really in for more problems. And once we started the eviction along the way, I found out that the guy had brought a horse into the apartment.
You had the horse living there.
You gotta be kidding! A horse living in an
The
apartment?
first floor.
There was a
Big
horse
apartment.
in the apartment. Yeah. So,
Now that takes the cake. It definitely does. You have to be kidding me.
Here's one here. You've got to be kidding. It's got nothing to do with landlord tenant unless you call a body bag. There was a man in a body bag, and he came back to life. They think he was
saw
declared
something like
dead.
that
It
on
was at the
TV one
funeral
time.
home.
Wow.
They, someday we ought to have these funeral home situations.
Boy, what
where
stories they would have.
Oh,
they bury
yeah.
them wrong.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Here's where a man, talk about money, he went after his $20 bill in a sewer, and he got stuck there for 2 days.
Oh, my God.
But the other one, which is, by the way, we should tell people how we have all these folders on identity theft, and especially the students too, don't pay for the
Oh, sure.
promise of a job. It's a scam. If anybody's looking, that you have to pay money. But why don't we finish up with the bird at the window?
The one that,
I had
that we
my
had.
bird. Yeah, you had. I've never had a situation.
oh, that was
since
really
then.
something. I was at Roberta's house one night. We were planning for our show, and you mentioned to me, gee, the funniest thing happened. In my room, I'm hearing this sound,
Yeah.
and you didn't know what it was. And finally,